There's an increasing band of parents that say no way to the direction that the culture is heading. No way am I going to let my child brain rot. We are disgusted with the shallow and perverse modern culture and want a deep, rich life for our kids. Sadly, cutting screen time isn't going to be enough. My husband's a youth pastor, and we've learned that teenagers make their own decisions, and they usually reflect all the decisions of the people around them, unless they are shown a more glorious way. In this video, I'm going to show you the deep things that really cure brain rot. Not some hacks for this week, but how to intentionally raise children who choose meaningful life over the shallow hits of online culture. To truly cure brain rot, we have to open our children's eyes to 6 deep realities. But this first thing is so counterintuitive because you almost feel like, as a parent, your job is to sanitize the real world for your child. And you know they're going to have to learn about hard things one day, but isn't childhood supposed to be the time of protection and of bunnies and butterflies, that they don't even have to deal with that stuff? And oftentimes our children are kind of shut off either in elementary schools or on screens from the things that are actually happening around them. But that way of thinking just came crumbling down for me a few years ago. But when my oldest daughter was 6, we had some neighbors move in who we would be sitting there like 9 o'clock at night, and you would just hear the truck. Bang, bang, bang. You're like looking out, like, what is going on there? The man in the truck and the wife are like yelling at each other. Eventually the police show up. We get to know this family, and he's an alcoholic. And so the lady's dealing with all sorts of things. And that's the type of situation that naturally I would not want my 6-year-old to observe. But the way that we've decided to parent, our kids are with us. And so she heard conversations that we would have as I would drive this lady to where she needed to go. We sat down. I remember sitting at my dining room table and teaching my neighbor how to study the scripture with OIA. And my 6-year-old daughter was right there. We all had our worksheets and we were walking through it. And it was not convenient at all. She would knock on the door like right when we got home. I had not yet changed my baby's diaper, and she would knock on the door. And it was very challenging, honestly, to walk through. But looking back, I'm so grateful, mostly because my daughter saw this. And you know what? She doesn't think alcohol is funny. She's seen it wreck a family. Seeing the reality of the suffering of people in this world proves that brain rot type entertainment is worthless. But that doesn't mean I don't want my children to have a carefree childhood. And you may say to me, I would rather my kid watch a ballerina with a cup for a head dance than watch a family fall apart from alcoholism. And I would almost agree with you. But I've had further experiences that have driven a similar point home in the last few years. 11 years ago, I made a determination. If I met a missionary who was in the States, I was going to have them over for dinner because they don't stick around very long and they're super interesting people. So I met this missionary couple 7 years ago. They came over for dinner. They were going to go over for their first assignment overseas. And they were pumped, and we were pumped for them. Went over, studied the language, worked very hard, came back to have their first baby. And that visit, they were also excited and happy. We didn't know then that they would be back before the year was up, devastated. Their country had gone through a terrible earthquake. We're talking, apartments flattened. They had to go through the experience of waking up at night, feeling their home shaking and not knowing what would happen, running and getting the baby. not knowing if they would make it out. They sat in my living room and were just so broken. And my two younger girls were playing with the infant, the crawling baby, and my 14-year-old sitting there listening to these people struggle, feeling like they would never get over what they had experienced. We got to watch them move from this place of like struggling to lament, using the Psalms, to beginning to have an open mind about that God might send them again, and then finding an open door and leaving us again. Now, you would think that because my daughter saw the immense suffering of God's people who choose to follow him, she would be turned off from that path. But the suffering of Christ's servants actually makes the gospel more beautiful. And it brings the glory and weight that we want so badly. And so my daughter wants to be a missionary. She wants her life to be spent bringing the gospel to people who have never heard it. And that gravity that came from seeing God's faithful servants suffer. So don't just cut screen time and try to cure brain rot. Invite Christians to your table. All Christians have a testimony of the grace of God in their pain. But missionary stories are the best, so I would highly recommend getting the missionaries there when they're stateside. Now, I hope you don't misunderstand me to say tragedy is the antidote for brain rot, because I don't think that at all. I think reality is the antidote for brain rot. And this really hit home for me from a fairy tale written by George MacDonald called The Light Princess. I will spoil it all for you, but you should definitely read it. I think we listened to it actually on LibriVox several times. It's like an hour and a half long. Jumping to the important part. There is a princess. She has been cursed with a lack of gravity. Doesn't that sound like brain rot? So she floats around and she giggles all day, but she never smiles. And a prince falls in love with her. And the one thing she loves is the water, the lake. She actually has weight when she's swimming, and so she loves it. But alas, her aunt curses her again, and she drains the lake dry. But at the bottom of the lake, there is a plaque that says, at the sacrifice, the self-giving sacrifice of someone, this lake can fill back up. So the prince is like, I will do it. I love you. And he sits on the plug and the water begins to fill back up, and she's ecstatic. She's splashing, she's swimming, and the water just keeps going. And you're like, wait, what's happening? And the boy dies. He drowns. And the princess realizes what he did, and suddenly her gravity returns. The sacrificial love of Jesus is our gravity. And you'll have to listen to the rest of the story to find out what happens next. So the mission becomes, how do we pass on the significance of the death of Christ to our children? This is important to all Christian parents, but so many of them are missing the primary way that God has designed to pass on the significance of Christ to our children. My husband has been a youth pastor for 13 years, and we've seen this trajectory of students growing up in Christian homes and then walking away from it all. And through that and the conversations that we've had dealing with these devastating students, we created a tool called the Culture Proof Audit. It's just a 5-minute assessment that can kickstart young families into the intentionality that they need to have to help their kids continue in the faith as young adults. So you can get that in a link below. The way most churches run their service, kids are actually separated from the people in the church that know the weight of the glory of Christ the best. So we decided not to follow into that typical pattern. And we kept our kids with us during the service. I remember when I was like a very young parent, I heard John Piper say, there is no children's version of lightning, and there is no children's version of the church. The church is powerful. And I want my kids in there with people who have walked with Christ for years, who have suffered and who are still following after Jesus. God has designed the gathering of the body of Christ to bring reverence for his death. I am convinced that giving our kids a good dose of reality is the cure for the shallow brain rot entertainment culture. But I love fantasy. I think I get this from my dad. He says, why would I want to read a book about the real world? I have to actually live in the real world. And in one sense, I agree. If we only had to live with like the dark realities that are right in front of us, that would be terrible. But fantasy actually has a greater purpose. Well, our family really likes Moana. And right now, all of my kids are sick, probably with hand, foot, and mouth. So they just rewatched the movie. My favorite part of Moana is when the heart of Te is restored. And you see beautifully, physically, that the curse has been broken. And the Garden of Eden spreads back over the whole world. You could see the garden city that they were meant to live in. So watch that and then walk outside and think. The curse of sin is broken. One day, this earth, we are awaiting a new heavens and a new earth where righteousness dwells. That's reality. And that's more than I can see with my eyes. The best part of media is that it can unveil the glories of reality. And if it doesn't do that, it's not worth my time. It's not worth my children's time. One more way that we grasp reality that is such a lost part of our culture that we have to take actually extra steps, I think, in this direction to course correct. At the end of every summer, which is so soon, if we are brave enough to go out in the heat, then we go and beside a stream, we spot the orange flowers. And we'll go over and got to hunt through the leaves and find the seed pods. When somebody finds one, they call everybody over and they will tap it. And when they do, it springs open, full, like shoots seeds everywhere. And it's so satisfying. It's jewel weed. I love how afterwards you can see the little spiral that was containing the seeds in like this pressurized compartment. Paul teaches in Colossians 1 that I should connect that jewel weed to Jesus Christ. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. You know the hymn, the things of this earth grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Well, when you see the greater reality behind a physical reality, brain rot grows strangely dim. It just can't compare to the satisfaction of connecting Christ to the world around us. But my nature knowledge when I became a mom was abysmal. If I was outside, I saw nothing. But that's not okay. Because if I can't lead my children into the glories of the real world around them, then they will drift into brain rot culture. Discover wonders outside with your kid because the holy reality touches every blade of grass. So I had to take definite steps in this direction. I made a video that shows the 3 family activities that really transformed our family culture and connected us to nature again. And it's very practical. I think you'll enjoy it. May God bless your family and help you to rise above and see the glorious reality that is right there.